I'm not an economist or a historian or anything like that. I'm a psychologist. So I do have an interest in human behavior. I have a keen interest in that. And I will be injecting some of my understanding and training during the course of these conversations that we'll be having. But I'm by no means trying to put myself up here as an expert. I'm an interested party. I've listened to the book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, twice. Found it very compelling. And I think it's an important topic for all of us who consider ourselves Pan-Africanists, who have a love for our homeland, our continent, and who want to understand what happened. I mean, we know about the transatlantic slave trade and all that, but what else happened? What is the social and economic context through which we can understand what happened to our continent? So those are the questions that I hope that we can answer over the next series of meetings. So without ado, I'm going to start by just telling you a little bit about Walter Rodney, who is the author of the book. And he's written, he also wrote several other books, but this is his most famous. I would call this his seminal work. Well, Walter Anthony Rodney was born on March 23rd, 1942, in Georgetown, Guyana. He grew up during Guyana's anti-colonial movement. You know, it's always interesting to hear about people's background, because I think it helps to explain where maybe their interest in certain topics comes from. His father was a member of the Marxist-oriented People's Progressive Party, and which led the struggle against British rule. He has been recognized as one of the Caribbean's most brilliant minds. Mr. Rodney, or Dr. Rodney, graduated with a PhD with honors from the School of Oriental and African Studies, London University. He became a member of the CLR James Study Group and deepened his understanding of Marxism. In July of 1966, he took his first teaching post at the University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. And this was during the period of radical political and agrarian reform led by Julius Nyerere, who was the father of modern Tanzania. Many exile liberation movements found themselves based in Dar es Salaam, including the ANC, Frelimo, and MPLA. MPLA was an Angolan group, and Frelimo, I'm blanking, I don't know if that was Mozambique.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Rodney was influenced by the Black Power movement in the United States, Third World Revolutions, and Marxist theory. He began, of course, to actively challenge the status quo. In 1968, while a professor at the University of the West Indies in Jamaica, he began reaching out to the working class. So he didn't stay in the classroom. He actually started talking to the people. He explained to them the significance of Africa to the Caribbean, to Caribbean history, and the importance of the struggles against racial and social legacies of slavery and colonialism. He wrote articles, he made speeches and lectures, and these were published and became central to the Caribbean Black Power movement. As a result, when he returned from a Black Writers' Conference, Jamaica refused to let him back in the country. So, of course, protests ensued because he had been integrating with the people, and those protests occurred not only in Jamaica, but in other parts of the Caribbean, in Tanzania, Canada, and London. So he wound up returning to the University of Dar es Salaam, and he lectured there from 1969 to 1964. And during that time, in 1972, he published the seminal work that we're talking about, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. His effectiveness in raising awareness among the, not only the intelligentsia, but also among working people, made him a target of some governments. Kind of remind you of Martin Luther King Jr. And that of Guyana. In 1980, he was assassinated by the then Guyanese president. His name was Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham. A subsequent inquiry substantiated the fact that this Burnham guy was very much aware of the plan to assassinate him and did nothing to intervene. So what has happened is that once again, we find great thought leaders are attacked, and people believe that if we can kill the thought leader, we can kill their thoughts. And for me, I think one of the lessons I take away from this kind of thing is that when they kill our leaders, and growing up in the 60s, they killed a whole lot of them. Rather than be afraid and run and hide, I think we should be inspired and realize that person was clearly telling the truth about what we should do to free ourselves from the shackles of racism and oppression, colonialism, whatever ism we're experiencing at the time. These sessions, I tried to come up with what I thought might be a provocative question for us to kind of examine during the course of the conversation. So one question that I had was, did Africa need to be developed? And I'm not even sure what that means. What do we mean by development? And we'll be looking at some definitions of that. And what does it mean to need to be developed? So what is development? Well, we can think of three levels of development. The individual, social development, and national development. And if you think about individual development, I like to think of individual or human development as having two factors. One is growth and the other is maturity. Dr. Rodney talks about development as an individual means having greater freedom, more responsibility, and also attaining more skills. So we look at it a little differently. And again, I'm looking at it more as like a psychologist. Social development, and again, when we talk about social, we're talking about not just one person. We're talking about people who are interacting with others. And what he identifies during social development is the emergence of leaders who impact the group. So think about your presidents, your kings, your emperors, whoever's running the show, your military junta. But these are the people who then make the decisions about who you trade with, who you talk to, who you fight, what wars you engage in. And finally, national development. And there are really only two criteria to think about. And that is, nationally, are you dependent on other countries, or are you independent? Can you make your own decisions about how you're going to run your country, how your people are going to live their lives? So getting into economic development.
Yes, because how much has the world changed economically, right? Because if we're thinking in the way that he explained it, those are the economics. That's the reason why that someone said things needed to be developed for economics for a few, right?
What he looked at economics also, the way I understood it, is there were other driving forces such as science. What were the laws of nature that people uncovered and could use to help them, to help push society forward? Tool use was another development. Learning how to make things in a more efficient manner. learning how to make things that could be mass-produced or could help you mass-produce things. And the social structure had to do, in terms of economic development, with the manner in which work is organized. So when I first saw this, first thing I thought of was overseer. Okay, you gotta have an overseer, all right, to make sure the work gets done. So you gotta be a big boss on top. You've got the, and think about slavery, if you will. Think about plantation owners. They're running the whole show, they have the big picture, but they have to have people in place to make sure that the things that they need to happen are actually happening. So now we get into and this is more of a Marxist formulation of how economic systems develop. And according to Marx, and this is what Rodney subscribed to, first you had communalism. And if you think about those early African civilizations, isn't that what they had? They talked about things like the old people were taken care of. Nobody went hungry. The children were taken care of. There were no orphans that were just, running around without anybody to care for them. Communalism is organizing your society in a way that benefits all, right? And then feudalism is considered the next step. I guess my question is, was it a step forward or was it a step backwards? Because with feudalism, now you've got property owners. Remember those overseers we talked about? So they've got the people who are running the land, and now you've got folks on the bottom, the serfs, who have to work the land, serfs or the slaves. And in fact, I've noticed that Rodney and maybe Marx use the term serf and slave interchangeably, so that we don't usually think of serfs as slaves, but they would say, I think, that they were. And then on to capitalism. So that's a progression that they see the economic systems developing over time. And they would also, now, here's something that I came up with a little bit, not all of this, but I added, I included slavery because that's apparently what Marx said, that communalism yielded to slavery. I don't understand how. I don't understand how that would happen if you've got a group and you're taking care of your people. So would the slaves come from somebody who tried to impinge upon your group, who tried to take your women, take your land? I don't know. I don't know where slavery would arise out of communalism, unless it has to do with maybe some kind of overt threatening act, and then that's how you got slaves.
Maybe that's in reference to extreme communalism, whereas you have one person at the top, or a small group at the top, and everyone else is doing collective work, but they're not necessarily doing the collective work, they're making the decisions. So in essence, you can say that these people are contributing to, yes, everyone's well-being, but some people, being the leadership, the few, aren't doing the physical labor, they're doing the thinking labor. There's another book, Brave New World. In Brave New World,
Aldous Huxley.
Yeah, with Aldous Huxley, yes. Brave New World kind of talks about similar situation, but that people are born into who they're going to be. It's like a caste system.
Right.
People are born into who they're going to be, and they can never be anything else, and they should accept that. So yeah, if you're an alpha, you're an alpha. If you're a beta, you're a beta. Epsilon semi-moron, they call them epsilon semi-moron, and they don't mind being called a moron. But it's called epsilon semi-moron. They're like more like lower class, taking out the trash and these menial kind of jobs that have to be done by someone in society.
Right.
But the point is that everyone accepted their roles, and the people that rebelled every now and again, there's this drug they had called soma. and everyone would take soma, and then they're back to normal, listening to what they're supposed to do and following the rules.
Is it acceptance or is it conditioning? I remember you said that.
I like that, yeah. Thank you.
And possibly through conditioning, that could be the slavery aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Because now I'm conditioned to listen. And kind of like how we were talking about religion last week, in a way. Because of that, like, are we all just like accepting that we'll have a mansion in heaven? Or have we been conditioned to think that?
Right. Well, on this chart that I just put, a progression of economic systems, you notice I put Karl Marx plus. And that's because I added a final category of surveillance capitalism. I was watching a documentary about artificial intelligence and how, what was it? If you're not getting services from the computer program, you're the product. Right, you're the product.
Let's say the exact quote.
Yeah, please.
If anything is given to you for free,
Right.
in the information age, you are the product.
You're the product. So if you get something for free, like Facebook, like Twitter,
Any
which
social
is now
media.
X,
Like,
I saw that.
like WhatsApp, you're the product.
So our information, our data
Right.
is the new currency.
Right.
When you were talking about surveillance, surveillance culture, you called it?
Surveillance capitalism.
Surveillance capitalism.
And actually, I didn't call it. Some woman on this show called it.
Okay. What they're surveilling is your behavior
yes.
and your patterns and such. And we can say that's data as well, because
It's
that
data.
gets compiled into zeros and ones. So
Right.
that's why I say data is the new currency. And again, another book, George Orwell. You know, that's about the surveillance state. You know, Big Brother and such, and you know, again, all the things they put in place, trying to eliminate words out of the lexicon, so that if there's no word called freedom, I don't know I should be free.
Whoa.
If there's no word called pursuit of happiness and all these things that we like hold these truths to be self-evident. If these things are not words anymore and we've
They're not
erased them from the lexicon, then we don't know that we want these things because they don't exist.
It also absolves them from liability, because if you can use that data in predictive analytics to see or know what the potential of an outcome will be based on one's patterns and behavior, you can't say that I'm discriminating against you because I'm using that information that is from you. It is you.
Which is the algorithm.
Absolutely.
You guys are so smart. So, but we do know that capitalism does develop at different rates. And y'all know who this is on the left. You know that's Walter Meyer, right? That's Walter Meyer.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
That's when you went to visit the Himba tribe, yeah.
All right. So the fact is that capitalism does develop at different rates. So you've got a more simplified, I call it simplified society on the left. And then you've got this complex.
Why does that word disturb me, simplified?
And I was trying not to use primitive
Okay.
or simple.
No.
I was trying to come up with something that was, what word, uncomplicated? I don't know what I should use.
Balance.
But the reason I'm saying simplified is because you don't have to get in your car and drive 20 miles to go to work with smog and congestion.
So there needs to be some context to that simplified.
Okay,
Because one could,
Mm-hmm.
because that's open to interpretation, and that could be, what did you say, epsilon semimoron. Someone can project simplification or simplified as uncivilized, right? You look at this image, we've been conditioned to think that this is uncivilized, and this is well developed in balance with nature and all things that is within the creator's realm.
I like balance.
Balance. It's
I like
within
that.
balance.
Because when you live that way, I definitely think the picture on the left is in balance with nature. And the one on the right,
Absolutely.
way out of balance.
Out of balance. There's nothing that's going to go back into the earth. This projects, we're going back into the earth.
It just
What-
takes and takes and takes.
Yes, it just
Gives
takes
nothing.
and takes and takes.
Even the pigment they're wearing, which is why they look a bit red,
Exactly.
even that's red ochre that they use to protect themselves from the sun.
Absolutely.
So the Himba tribe in Namibia, both men and the women, put this red ochre on daily. You know, it's like part of their ritual. So yeah, like, you know, definitely in tune with nature. Like you're actually
Right.
working with nature.
You're working in unison,
Right.
living within your purpose,
Yeah,
right?
I like that. Balance.
Balance.
I love balance.
And that's a great contrast. And in regards to development, what is development? Like really, what is it?
So let's talk, because this is something that I think about, is would I rather live like this and have to go and get my water and cook every day and no supermarkets and, you know, would I rather, that's being in balance, or are there some things about being out of balance that you kind of like right? Like going to the supermarket, like having people cook stuff for you.
That's the catch-22, right?
Yeah,
Because
so
we have evolved to a point where we've experienced both sides. Maybe some of us have imbalance and out of balance. And you become conditioned to what is privilege and convenience, right?
Right.
If you didn't know, right, if you were still here, you would know. You would know that there is this opportunity to get in your car and drive, right? You would know that you could easily strike a lighter and create fire, right?
Air conditioning.
Air conditioning, yes. you wouldn't know anything. You would know that there is a such thing as a sanitary pad, right?
Right.
All of these conveniences. So that's the catch-22. But what is the...
I have a digression.
Go right ahead.
Is it evolution? Because when we think about evolution, like in terms of like the original, like at least the way I think about it, the original sense of the word, it's like an opposable thumb. That's a huge thing. Try doing anything without your thumb. Anything.
Any of your fingers are
Good luck.
Yes.
Try grasping anything without your thumb and then think about how much that changes your life and how you interact with the world. An opposable thumb.
As simple as that.
Using a lighter, even you need your thumb, yes. But just to say that a lighter is evolution, not that you said it in that context,
Yes.
but technology is not necessarily an evolution in my way that I'm thinking.
But
in
don't they
making this
consider
point.
fire, making the wheel, evolution and technology?
They consider it an innovation.
This is where
An
you
innovation.
got all this
Now-
gray area.
Yes, 100%. But like when you think about how something evolves, it's becoming something different, something else. But if it's just a better way of doing something the same, because wheel is just mobility. It's just
Did
a
we
better
become
way.
something else with the being able to?
I feel so because other animals, even animals that are very close to us, such as the great apes, you know, their opposable appendages aren't as evolved as ours, which means they can do less things. They can use tools, but they can't use them at the level and precision that human beings can use tools because our opposable thumb is so evolved.
Is it
Like,
because of
they're
the
way over
opposable
here.
thumb, or is it because they just don't, they live within their purpose? That they don't seek, they don't, I think they do have the capacity to make choices, right? But I don't know if they have the capacity to make choices outside of necessarily their greater purpose.
Give me an example. What you mean.
Like, I think when they interact with human beings, they become a little bit more conditioned to adapt to behaviors that they can mimic from human beings. That can be perceived as evolution. And in doing so, if you see a human being and you see them do a thing, like pick up something or move something or work something, is that we're talking about someone who is, we're talking about our closest cousin, someone that is in the primate, right? Family. Are we, their ability to use that thumb because they saw us do something and they're mimicking that, is that evolution? Or is that innovation? I'm just trying to understand, we're going way off topic, but I'm just trying to understand in that analogy of using the primate as our closest cousin, right? And them being able to use their opposable thumb, their appendages. Is that based on them seeing us interact in an environment and observing us and saying, oh, I think I can figure out how to do that. And if they had no contact with us and they're living within their purpose without being able to witness something different, would it be the same?
From being an avid nature show watcher, I would say that our use of tools has nothing to do with primates' use of tools. Because you'll see primates that have never had contact with people bashing a stone on a nut to crack the nut.
Yes.
They don't need to see us to do it. That's innate
Yes.
to who they are.
Intelligence.
Yes, exactly. That's innate to who they are. They know.
Using a twig to get termites.
I've seen that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Thank you for that, yes.
So we've been talking about development, what does it mean, different kinds of development, capitalism, economics, and now we're ready to talk about imperialism. So how do we define imperialism? Well, Rodney defines it as a phase of capitalism in which countries establish political, economic, military, and cultural hegemony over another country. Hegemony, of course, meaning domination. And the imperialist countries have the ability to choose which countries they're going to dominate and profit from. And of course, they always choose the weak countries that have the most resources that they need, right?
Is it that they're weak or that they have such valuable resources and they come in and project on them that they're somehow weak because they don't see the value in the resources and haven't tapped into them the way that they intend to?
I think we can say that when the European invaders came, they had more developed weapons.
That's for sure.
Okay? And so as a result, African, Latin American, Asian countries would be considered weaker just because they weren't able to defend their countries off at that level.
From a war strategy.
From a military.
Okay.
Right. Just because they have military superiority doesn't mean they're always going to win. That was the lesson that I got from that. But in this case, this is new. People weren't used to seeing these weapons. They won.
Okay, so we are defining weak based from a military perspective, a military strategy, not weak in that people are weak, but that they didn't have the military stronghold or the weaponry. I think that our greatest strength is our kindness, and that our kindness made it such that we weren't thinking to create weapons to destroy a whole people, and I think that's strength. But when you have someone who is creating weaponry for the purpose of survival, where other people were already thriving, I think that position is a little bit more questionable. We're only speaking from a military perspective.
Well, I'm only speaking from the military perspective because that was part of the way they took control.
Oh, I know.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure for the audience that.
So sure, I agree with the fact that we are richer, I think, in humanity. But humanity Was it going to protect your gold mines?
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't.
Okay.
When we think about military intervention, we can look at an African example with the Zulu tribe. Shaka Zulu brought about a certain kind of spear that was a different shape, different length. The head of it had a different width. So instead of throwing your weapon, he thought that this was a waste of military tactic. You're just throwing your weapon to the enemy, and they would keep your weapons.
Right.
Now you had to have more. And what if they ran up to you in close combat? You don't have anything. Or if you still had your spear, it's too long. So he innovated that weapon, pretty much broke it in half, and made the head larger for more of a thrusting, stabbing motion.
Okay.
And that turned out, like, in addition to what they call the bullhorn strategy of surrounding, encircling your enemy, that pretty much changed warfare on the African continent, particularly in the southern African region. So we can look at examples directly from Africa as well for military might, and that was not necessarily just plain survival of we need to eat. That was more so domination of your region and eliminating potential rivals. So from the European standpoint, not that Africans were potential rivals for them geographically, but we can look at it as they were using Africa as a proxy that if, let's say, the British didn't dominate Africans, or the French didn't dominate Africans, or the Portuguese, meaning whoever didn't do it first, their direct European enemies would have the upper hand against them. Just as another way to view that.
Right.
Because quite often, in this kind of space, when we think about military history and technology, we often talk about Europeans and how they made cannons and muskets and this and this and this, but we're not thinking about, like, what about even before that? We had evolution in military technology.
Yes.
So like this is what I meant at first, even before Europeans stepped foot on the African continent, we were innovating in a military way.
Yes.
Quite often when we talk about having African unity and these kinds of things, we say we need our own currency, we need our own military, right? And then all of a sudden everyone gets quiet because, oh, you know, Africans, we don't make weapons. Why don't we? We made the first weapons.
Yes.
So of course we do, and we've always been innovating on those weapons. Yeah, if you look at historically, arrowheads and, you know, everything's been left over, axe heads and these kinds of things, you see the evolution of these from where they started and then up till, again, European interventions. And even their gunpowder they didn't make. They got that from China.
So, yeah, we have a lot to talk about in terms of what Africa needs. So the next question is, what is underdevelopment? We've been talking about development and different aspects of that. What does underdevelopment mean? And underdevelopment, the way that Rodney used this term is as a comparative term to development, because he wanted us to understand, I'm going to use a term that I think is correct, the dialectic between Europe's exploitation of Africa, the continent, and being able in turn to develop their countries, and the way that Africa was subjugated, exploited, raped, if you will, of its natural resources, and how that led to African underdevelopment. So he doesn't use this as a standalone term. It's always a term that's compared to what Europe did to Africa. I think that's an important point. Underdevelopment of a country always has an element of exploitation, right? Because you've intervened and basically interrupted the development of that particular nation for your own means. The control can be either direct or indirect. So even though you had the people running the colonies on the continent, it was really the king and queen of England or whoever,
All the way across.
Portugal, yeah. They were the ones who were really exerting the control. And And underdevelopment always involves an outside negative influence, always.
My perspective on underdevelopment in real time now. So yes, it is that feudalism, right? The few subjugating the greater population for their gain, their personal gain, and overindulgence. Yes, absolutely. So to bring that to more of the reality of now, if I can use myself as an example. Since I've been here in Rwanda, I've had an opportunity to do a lot of observation internally and externally, a lot of observation internally and externally of what role do I play within the greater global community society, right? And what role do I want to play? How do I want to improve and how do I want to add value and contribute? So, with that being said, I see that there is a caste system, a classism that is here in Rwanda. It is in full effect. And
The whole continent.
oh,
The whole continent.
the whole continent. Okay, I've only been here. The whole continent. And so I think I've said this before. I can really see how slavery or being a serf could be in real time now. I just hired my first house person. And I know once I've done my observation and I've stayed at a couple of places, I know that I wanted to, and I polled a few people to find out like how much do you pay, how much do you get paid. And so for me, I said that when I do the math, that's not livable wage. And I understand how one can be underdeveloped when you are not even being paid a living, impossible wage. So I decided to really invest in the people, right? So my person, she's getting paid well. And that's something that I'm hoping to stay committed to, and that's something that I'm hoping that more people who are coming to Africa or coming to visit Africa will really invest in. We don't come here to Africa because wherever we come from, we may be at a lower class, and then when we come here, we're a little bit higher, and then now we want to subjugate people and take advantage of how they've already been exploited.
The new colonial.
Exactly. And we have a lot of white saviors, and as people that love Africa and Pan-Africans, we don't want to be black saviors, right? We want to be equitable partners. What you described there, Ursula, is intentionalism. You're intentionally not trying to exploit the people. The opposite was true of the Europeans. They were intentionally exploiting the people.
There you go.
So we can't really say that, well, of course you can say what you're saying because you know that you don't want to do that. Yeah, which is commendable. But some people don't even know they're exploiting. And they just go along with like, well, this is just how it is, let me just go with it.
You think so?
I do. I've seen it in front of my own face, yeah.
They have no cognition, and they don't think empathetically that if I was in this position, I wouldn't want to be in this position? Or do they pretend like they?
Okay, well, in terms of empathy, that's a different way. So empathetically, if this were me, would I want to get paid Western wages, for example? I don't have the answer to that, but I do have a counter. And the counter would be, if everyone today, this very second, got paid Western wages and aren't used to it, what would that do to society and economy?
Oh, I know that it would take everything.
Well, it would cause inflation right away.
Well.
Overnight. And it would be catastrophic. That's what happened, like when we read about the richest man in history, Mansa Musa. He went on his pilgrimage, went through all these poor and developing countries, and went to Mecca, just dishing out gold, making it rain everywhere, making it rain, making it rain, making it rain.
Right.
And then he collapsed many economies. So on his way back, he had to make up for that and see what he can do to like actually help out, because his charity was actually doing the opposite. And we see that today with aid in Africa. Aid money in Africa makes people dependent and makes them less likely to do something for themselves.
And I think it's designed that way.
But I digress.
I think it's designed that way. I think it's designed to give the NGO people ongoing jobs,
There you go.
okay? And it's also designed to keep people dependent. So it's a vicious cycle.
Like the welfare system in America.
And to keep the money flowing.
Yes.
Because wherever the money's coming from, they don't give that money if you look like you're actually getting better. If someone's getting better, society's improving, people are getting jobs, people are getting paid a livable wage, well, guess you don't need money anymore, or aid from us.
That's
Y'all
interesting.
good? It's solved. It's like the pharmaceutical industry. If we cure cancer, where's the money?
Where's the money?
Who's gonna need those drugs?
Exactly. So you want to keep people dependent on you for whatever it is and keep a problem. There needs to be a problem for money to flow in these kinds of instances. From their perspective, obviously we can think of other ways to make financial continuity, let's say, for everyone. Yeah, I guess sharing the wealth is like, it's like Miss Deb was actually, sharing the wealth in that sense. We can think of other ways to do that, but again, traditionally, the powers that be were not interested in the prosperity of the many. They were only interested in their own prosperity and again, exploitation. So I think it behooves us today of how we can use these kinds of lessons and lectures and books from a brother like Walter Rodney, of how to use the knowledge that we've learned of what's happened in the past and now develop the continent the right way. Because yes, it was underdeveloped on purpose, and if you look at it, when that broader question comes, did Africa need to be developed? It was already developing. I think what's missing from that question is, did it need to be developed by Europeans? Or any outside force? Because Arabs even came before Europeans. So any outside force, did we need development from any outside forces? And I would say that we were already developing at our own pace and in our own way, based on our own needs and circumstances societally.
Naturally and in balance.
Yeah. So if our society doesn't call for cars and steel and concrete buildings, then what's wrong with our adobe mud structures? Which still, some of them, they can't prove how they were made to this day. The great mosque in Jenne, for example, made out of all mud, still stands today.
No air conditioning.
No. Actually, air conditioning was invented as well outside of the West.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not necessarily like a machine. Yeah, exactly. Just the design, the design of a building channels air through the building and can make it cooler.
That's true.
So we had all these advances in technologies, and even scholars and historians have proven that Europeans came to Africa for enlightenment and advancement and how to do this and how to do that. They came to universities in Timbuktu and Alexandria. And this is before whatever they built with Harvard and whatever school they want to talk about, Oxford, etc.
There's a great book
called
Stolen Legacy that talks about that. Is it George James? Is that his name? All right, so this is going to piss you off. Let me just tell you.
all of it does.
This pisses me off. It's looking at the characteristics of developed versus underdeveloped countries. And developed countries are those that are considered industrialized, and industrialized through both science and agriculture. I was looking at a program today or yesterday that talked about using solar power, these little solar power robots, if you will. They're like little carts, and they go through the fields and they use technology to identify the weeds.
Oh yeah, the laser.
And they zap the weeds. And they also analyze the crop. This one needs more nutrients in the soil. This one needs more water. This section, I mean, it's fascinating. But I kept thinking, I'm sure there are people who've been farming for many, many years who already know this. Okay? And why is it that technology always seeks to take the human out of it and replace it with the machine?
It's for the capitalism, right? If you take the human out of it, then you don't have to pay, and you can get more man-hours based on how that robot is built and programmed. But there's always a downside to that, because what I saw in that was you're burning the earth, you're burning the nutrients, you're killing the life that's in the soil. So you may be killing on the surface that weed, but you are not able to identify how much damage that laser is causing the soil. What are you gonna say, Mark?
The question would be, have those that seek domination over the earth ever cared about the sustainability of the earth?
No.
No. They only care about how much they can get out of it right now. When you look at a map from space of Haiti and Dominican Republic, you see a vastly different story.
Oh my God. Haiti is
diminished and dark.
Blue, brown, and Dominican is green.
Exactly.
And lush.
And lush. Because of how colonially, this goes back a long time, how colonially, even how those two sets of colonizers, the French and the Spanish, actually went about their business, let's say. And the French were very slash and burn, if we will, or smash and grab, whatever whatever you want to say.
Smash and grab.
Yeah, because they weren't thinking about the future. Definitely not for the people. They're only thinking about how can we get as much as we can right now. And it's documented that Haiti was the richest colony on earth at its heyday. In its prime, Haiti was the richest colony on earth because of the extreme measures the French went to just exploit the land and the people. But the average life expectancy of an African enslaved person was roughly 25, 26 years old. It worked them to death. Next. So they're not thinking about sustainability, when it comes to these factors. It's just how much can we get, how much can we squeeze out of it? Revenue now. And then when that's depleted, let's go to another place.
Right. So let's look some more at the characteristics of developed countries. Their citizenry has increased nutrient intake. Their citizenry lives longer. Their babies live longer. Their babies don't die very young, as often as much as non-developed or underdeveloped countries. Their professionals are highly skilled, and you don't have a lot of people leaving those developed countries going elsewhere. You don't have a big brain drain in the United States or in England, right? Because people want to be there. In the other underdeveloped countries, however, there's not a lot of science that's driving the agricultural production. There's decreased nutrient intake. People aren't getting the number of calories that, they might need. And, I saw this when I took my trips across West Africa. I started in Sierra Leone, then I went to Liberia, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, and then South Africa. And what I noticed is when I was in Sierra Leone for a week, the week that I was there, I think I saw 2 fat people. Because I was looking. Right? 2 fat people in a week. Liberia, also small people. It wasn't until I got to Cote d'Ivoire that people were bigger and their skin looked healthier, you know? So it's kind of interesting as I went further east, it felt like the people were doing better. I mean, that was just what I observed, which was kind of shocking. And you know, they were bigger. When I got to Côte d'Ivoire, they were bigger.
Healthier. They looked
I mean, I don't, by visualization, I would say.
Okay.
Of course, you know, you really need to look at, you know, disease prevalence and all that kind of stuff. Okay. Also in the underdeveloped countries, you're going to have decreased life expectancy, increased infant mortality. In Sierra Leone, man, it was like out of 1,000 live births, was it like 160 that didn't make it to their 5th birthday? It's horrible. Okay.
In regards to the health, and I just want to recognize, you did say there's no way that you can speak to the extent that one was healthy or not. But what I have noticed in observation is that the domestics here, especially the men, they seem to be way smaller. And there was a domestic in my last place. He was very small. He was very thin framed man, adult man. And observing him for over a significant amount of time, I noticed that working at minimum 12-hour days, 6 days a week, I didn't see him eat. I didn't see him eat during those 12 hours. And after a few weeks, I asked the question, when do you eat? And he said, I don't. And I was like, you don't the whole time? And he's like, no, I don't. So that got me thinking the psychology of enslavement and how in the subjugation, in order to weaken a person that you know has the capacity to be of great strength, you need to malnourish them. Not just physically, but mentally also, right? Because food is fuel for your brain, right?
Well, you know, before I visited here, before I moved here, it always used to bother me how people who came from places like Haiti, different African countries, always used to brag about their house help. That's to bother the heck out of me.
What does that mean, Brad? That they had?
That they had help, you know. And I mean, I remember one of the people who said that was somebody whose mother was a nurse's aide, and she was a clerk. So these are working class people, right? These are not professionals. But it was almost like that gave them worth, that they had someone who was under them. And I found it just very disturbing, very, very disturbing. And it just makes me wonder, I mean, I guess they thought they were impressing me. It was just the opposite. That did not impress me. I didn't like it at all. But is it human nature that we have to have somebody beneath us and we have to feel better? I mean, is that human nature? Maj, come on.
Only if you're insecure.
Okay.
Sorry.
Then there are a lot of insecure people there, right?
Yeah.
When I came here and I saw that most people have a domestic, I was like, that's different.
Yeah.
But then I started to think about it, how is that different from someone who is employing somebody? And that's where I began to inquire, how much are you paying? What is the average pay? How much are you actually getting paid? And I think that is the delta of understanding of if you're just looking to make yourself feel better in your position and plight that you've created for yourself? Or are you looking to add value from a community perspective and not subjugate people in the way that you may feel subjugated?
You know, I have a Rwandese daughter.
Oh, you?
She has 4 sons.
Okay.
And I forgot what I did for her. But she literally got down on her knees and was like, I said, oh, no, 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 we only do that to God.
In terms of actually employing a maid or a housekeeper. And when we discovered how cheap it was, we were like, how would that person survive off of that? And then we were like, well, we can't pay somebody that little bit knowing that, you know, you just can't measure somebody's worth that way. But then we were like, what does that do for that person when we pay them more money than they're accustomed to making, and then, God forbid, we have to pack up and leave and go. Now this person is accustomed to a certain amount of money, and then nobody's willing to give it to them. Are you putting that person in a bad position? Or in a difficult position? So that's one of the things we were talking about, and it was like, how do you find that in between, where that person is not put in that position per se, but you're still trying to help the economy?
I have a friend, and one of the things that she does that I really like, she has Rwandese children too, and she teaches them how to save. She goes and she's had them open up bank accounts. So let's say you're paying them $30 more a month than they used to. You could teach them to save that $30 and use that if they want to buy a house or for whatever, you know. So that might be a way to teach, because I mean, isn't that what we're supposed to do in the United States? You're supposed to live below your means, not above, not at, but below your means. So that might be something that might be useful.
This is hard. This is very hard because Marlon brought this to our attention and how it can create inflation. And within the economy, when you've recognized that people are living well below the poverty level, and you have the capacity to provide them with a little bit more, right? So that they're at least the tip of their nose is above the water, right?
And the next thing is, how do you set an example for other people to start seeing their worth? We had an experience at the grocery store at 2000, right? Quite familiar. And we were getting cashed out, and some of the prices were just not on the items, and one of the owners started shouting at the cashier who had nothing to do with it. Now, I'm fresh here, so we've been here, barely three weeks now, and I'm lit, because I'm like, why is she talking to him like that? Why she thinks she could do that?
Was it Chinese?
Yes. Yes. So I kind of kept my composure because I was like, you just came here, no start no problems, you know. So I kept quiet, but then when we left, I was like, babe, I feel guilty because I didn't say anything and I didn't stand up for him, and that's not okay. Later on that week, I spoke to a friend that is from here, and she said if you had said anything on his behalf, they would fire him the following morning. They would make him finish work that day, and they would fire him in the morning. And even though they know that they were at fault, they would fire him, and that's because they know everybody need a job. You know, so.
And you can't come in empowering people.
No.
And the people here need unions. Okay, that's what they need, unions. And they have the right to unionize, they have unions. All right, let's have a couple more, go ahead.
Can I mention that let's think about tipping. Tipping, yeah?
Yes.
Even in the West, right? Someone gives you good service, you tip them a larger amount, showing them that you appreciate their good service. Incentivization for them to do this same service, if not better, for others in the future. You don't just do that so they'll do bad service for others. You'd hope that, hey, I gave you more money than you're used to, maybe you'll do this better in the future. So about sustaining this level of, well, conditioning, if I give you this, you will do that. It has to be societal. It can't be individual. When it's individual, this is what I feel causes the ebbs and flows. Because if, for instance, now I'm from the village, or you know, just I'm not used to making this kind of income, and now I am, but my neighbor still has nothing. My neighbor's gonna look at me and covet what I want.
Always.
And even if they're like one of my besties, they're still gonna be like,
Your brother.
why you? Why you? You know Mzungus. You know people from outside.
Yes.
Then, if they're really, really tight with you, they can be like, how can we take advantage of them together? Because they have a lot. They don't even know what is in your pocket. They just assume that if you can afford to pay this one person that, you can afford to pay the whole community that. And then that's not sustainable for you. So it's a double, if not triple, quadruple-edged sword. Yeah, on all sides, you really have to be careful of like what they call the butterfly effect. One thing happens here, it affects something over there.
That is so real, because we have our lady. Today, she handed me the phone and she said, my sister wants to speak to you. And so the sister gets on the phone and she's like, I'm looking for work. And I'm like, oh boy. Which is what I really would like. I would like, because I know you said individual, right? One person, but like you said, can we create a village of people who begin to create this ripple, this butterfly effect, where we say that we're going to commit to, and I think we should really put numbers to this, right? We should really, for the greater audience that may not know or have never experienced Africa, put numbers to this. So let's just say, hypothetically, a person who is a domestic in an African country, hypothetically, gets paid $80 a month. Let's just say hypothetically.
That's high.
Yep.
You know that's high.
Damn. Okay. Let's do the math on that.
I'm thinking 30 to 50.
Yep.
Right? 30 to 50.
If y'all knew what we pay her. So now I'm worried about what Margie said.
That's why her friend called you.
Yes. If we do the math, and we've got our scheduled for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week,
Wow.
$80 a month. Do the math on that, what that is an hour. That's hypothetical.
Yeah.
Put some numbers to that, audience, and think about what that is an hour for a human being to live off of. I'm only thinking from a place of how can I help improve things?
I will say this, if you want to tip your server, and I learned this the hard way, I actually just asked a couple of servers, if you include the tip in your bill, they often don't get it.
It's okay.
That's what I
Yes.
think. So what I do is I Momo them directly. Okay, so I'll pay the bill, and then any tip I'll give to the server.
You first just hand the cards, you know, you write the bill, you don't make the whole tip, and then when you give it to them, you know. Behind, you know.
You do? You can't do it?
You palm the bill.
You palm it, right?
No, usually employ, again, you gotta think about how society has been. They're not trying to look after developing a middle class. That's not an individual way of thinking. It's more like, hey, I've reached where I've reached, I'm good.
Yeah.
They're not reaching back to pull people out of whatever their situation is. Without realizing, creating a strong middle class is the way for proper development. Natural progression of proper development.
Yeah, if you believe in
I
capitalism.
didn't know that. I'm really in it. What happens when you, like, what, somebody,
If management sees it, they want it.
they will.
Management sees it, they want
I
it.
did not.
And they could potentially fire that person
Huh?
for accepting it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because to them, you're stealing money from them.
Yeah.
You work here, which is why that person is giving you money. That belongs to me. I give you a salary already. You don't deserve that money. Give it to me.
So even when we tip, like, guys who pack our,
Yeah,
stuff,
take a look.
Get
Yes.
noises out there.
when we get to the car, then we get the tip.
Oh, you have to deliver,
Yeah, come
here, take it to the,
all to the car,
Right.
put it in the car, and we give your employee can see you. We
Did
give
not
them
know
money
that.
there, that's what we did.
That's smart. I like that.
Yeah, that's what we
What
did.
was, I didn't hear that, what you do?
When we went to, like, again, when we went to the grocery store, the guys came to deliver the stuff to the car.
Right.
We waited till they got to the car and my husband tipped them.
Ah,
Because we figured they tried to take them.
never even consider that.
so let's finish this up with just a couple more slides. And again, this is talking about dependent nations versus developed nations. And one of the things we know about wealth is that most wealth leaves Africa. And usually this is through trade exploitation.
Who's
Financial.
the dependent nation? Who's the dependent nation? I'm sorry, that was
We're
bugging.
gonna go, you'll know when I start talking about the characteristics, okay? Financial exploitation. Africa is structurally dependent. It's structured in a way where Africa produces the raw materials, Europeans take it, do
They're
their
dependent
thing,
on it.
and then come back and sell us the finished product. China does that. And the global north can actually end its dependence on Africa should they choose to do so. So they do depend on Africa, but they don't have to. They have enough resources that they don't have to depend on Africa, and they can end their dependence on Africa. Whereas dependent nations, now y'all hear this, will never be developed unless they have the capacity to exercise choice. The capacity to exercise choice is the hallmark of development.
Who made the definition of dependent?
This is again, all this is from Rodney. All this is from Rodney, Walter Rodney. Although this last part was mine. The black sellouts are the key.
Thank you. Thank you.
What choice? What choice was that?
So, for example, Niger just made the choice not to send any more uranium to France. That was a bold choice. But that is something that a dependent nation could not do. And so thereby, in a sense, by declaring that, they're showing the world we're independent. We don't have to rely on France. So, if you're not an independent nation, you're not able to say that. And it remains to be seen how independent they really will be. Because this is a long game, it's a chess game. It's not checkers, okay? It's a long game, so it remains to be seen what will happen. How will France respond? Will they send troops? Will they put financial sanctions on? It just remains to be seen what's going to happen. But this is very interesting what I see happening in Niger.
We can compare a little bit that idea of dependence, the concept of dependence, with a power or an outside entity that has convinced the local citizenry that they need them, with the situation of the Haitian Revolution, 1804, of saying, well, we thought we needed the French, But their barbarity has pushed us to do extreme measures.
I like that word.
And now we have to get rid of them. And that's what happened over a period of a few years, really. And directly following the French Revolution when they saw what happened there. So if our so-called masters have overthrown their master, why can't we overthrow them? So with the Niger example, and again France, these guys keep showing up, don't they? With the Niger example, we see that, okay, Niger has been exploited for so long by the French, even after so-called independence, they're still getting exploited and give all their uranium to France so France can power their fancy things. And now finally, someone stood up and said, no more. Is that then, can it be, a case of having ideas, meaning by the Niger people, having ideas of, without this force telling us what to do, because we were not just dependent on their barbarity or their brainwashing, we were dependent on them making all the decisions. So now if we need to make decisions, yes, thinking for us, yeah. So now if we need to make decisions for ourselves, are we prepared with the playbook and the strategy to play the long game, as you know, as you mentioned? Are we ready to play the long game? I don't know the answer to that yet.
I think you have to have a certain perspective. I think you have to have the perspective that you're going to make mistakes, and you will not allow your mistakes to define you, as the imperialists are wont to do. You're going to learn from revolutions like the Haitian Revolution, because we see that what has happened is it was the first democracy in the Western Hemisphere, the first, whatever. They were the first something in the Western Hemisphere.
Haiti.
Haiti, what was the first?
The first independent,
First
independent black nation.
Okay.
In the world.
And now we see where they are today. So you got to study what happened. How do we avoid this? Okay. So I think you have to be willing to make mistakes. I think you have to learn from history. And I think you're going to have to take the steps that are necessary for the people to see you have their interests at heart. I think those are three key things that Niger and any other country that wants to throw off the shackles of colonialism needs to do if they're going to have a successful post-colonial. By the way, I hate that term. To me, colonialism is a very mild, benign term. So I had some discussion questions that are just purely academic. I'll just ask one question, because we were just talking about Niger taking care of its people. Do you think China takes care of its people?
I think to an extent they do, to the extent that their people are bringing forth value. Yeah, I think they're very methodical and strategic as to how they govern their people, for sure.
Yeah, the China conversation is interesting because you can look at the lowest level of Chinese society, let's say the Uyghur population.
Yeah.
That are pretty much in the concentration camp. Yeah, they have to live here, they have to do this, they have to do that. And then you think about the top levels, someone like Jack Ma. Right? Jack Ma, billionaire, celebrity all over the world. He says one thing at one event that's controversial to the CCP, the Chinese government, and he disappears. Literally disappears. And when he appears again, it's like it seems he's been through brainwash training. Now he's talking differently. He's not so outspoken anymore. Actually, he's very reserved, if they let him talk at all. Same happened with the tennis player in China, very good tennis player. And we wouldn't know about this unless I think they call it the ATP, the tennis tour.
Yeah.
They stood up for her. Even Serena Williams put out a tweet saying, "Where is this girl?"
Oh,
Who's
yeah,
seen
yeah,
her?
yeah, that one.
They disappeared her.
Yeah.
Then when she reappeared, she didn't want to say anything about the stuff she was saying before. So does China take care of its people?
Yeah, they took care of them.
Right.
They took care of
So it depends what you mean by taking care of them.
Well, depending on the value that they bring to the governing and ways of knowing of China, quoting Dr. Carr, right?
Right?
Yeah, how are you contributing to our methodical, strategic vision of who and how China is and is branded?
So I was talking about, do they take care of their people economically? That's what I was referring to.
I knew that.
Okay.
And
I think that's still
Just for
factored in.
clarification.
I think that's still factored in.
it's relevant,
because I think even as they reappeared, was able and allowed to reappear, you can be alive, yes, and economically still make some money as long as now you've learned, don't say that shit no more.
I gave 3 examples now. Jack Ma, the tennis player, and the Uyghur population. The Uyghurs are not empowered to progress economically. They're actually oppressed and literally put in camps for I forget what they call it, reconditioning pretty much. Like, hey, fall back in line. Re-education, yeah. Which, what's that sound like? Jack Ma, someone like him that is a Han Chinese, because we have to remember who they actually care about, right? China, by and large, is a homogenous society, but there are lots of outlier groups, like the Uyghurs. And that only started getting talked about because, like so much proof was coming out that this was happening. Besides that, we wouldn't even know. We probably wouldn't even know there's other kinds of Chinese. We just think there's only one kind of Chinese. So the Han Chinese is what they care about. So when it comes to that, yeah, certain people are allowed to flourish, like the Jack Ma's, like like this tennis player. They're allowed to be successful at their craft, whatever it is, and they support that. Like we see China in the Olympics, they're getting better and better, even at sprinting. I was so surprised. I think 2 Olympics ago, or whenever it was in China, the Bird's Nest Stadium and all that. When Usain Bolt's winning all these medals, China came in pretty good place. And I was like, Chinese can run? I knew they could do gymnastics, but Chinese can run? Yeah, ping pong. Forrest Gump, I see that.
But even those that are in the concentration camps and being re-educated, they do bring some value to the greater government, right? Because I'm sure they're putting them to work economically in some way, right?
No, these guys break rocks. They do literally meaningless things.
Isn't that something?
They don't do anything with
purpose,
rocks.
right?
No, it's literally to beat it out of them, beat the fight out of them.
Oh.
It's like what you say about Nazi Germany or slavery. It's just beating the fight out of unwanted people. They don't want that.
Mandela had to do that in Rwanda.
Yeah, they don't want these people, but they also don't want Human Rights Watch coming down on them because now China is open and they're trying to show the world we want to do business with everybody, because they care about money more than anything.
So are they still socialist or are they capitalist country?
It's a hybrid, eh?
Hybrid.
It's a hybrid model.
Because they did uplift hundreds of thousands of people, probably millions,
Very short
out
amount
of
of time.
poverty.
Very
They did
short
do
amount of
that.
time. Millions.
Yeah,
Millions.
they did do that.
Very short amount of time, like less than 30 years.
So,
But remember,
the world is interesting.
remember, Miss Deb, these things say made in China.
Yeah.
They don't say by who. So it doesn't matter who made it in China. It was made in China, which is why the Chinese people, the country, its name is a brand.
Right.
Because China is a brand, more than a country, I would argue. China's a brand.
That's interesting.
Look at anything you wear, that you're drinking out of, that you use, it says made in China. They're a brand.
That's Chinese.
Everything is. Everything is.
China, yeah.
So the brand of China has risen to the highest of heights in a lot less time than all of Europe and America. So they've managed to do what they do without anyone your human rights microscope and you can't do that, you can't do that. They did what they wanted to. And now it's to the point that dependency, everyone else needs them.
Right.
So to link this back to development, China has not that it wasn't developed like a long time ago, because this is not China's first rodeo. This is just their newest rodeo. But China had a lot of stuff before. Then they went into a long period of nothing, and I don't want to say nothing, isolationism. Yeah, on purpose, isolationism, and they come back out of it.
Rethink our strategy.
Right.
Evolution.
Well,
Well, remember they had the opium wars, they had
yeah,
they had some challenges too.
with the British.
Yeah.
The British created the opium wars, not them. Chinese actually never did opium. The British brought it there to keep them down.
Right.
This is like what Reagan did in the 80s with crack in the black community. Like we didn't say, oh, we need some crack right now. We were trying to progress.
Right.
They put that into our society. So to bring this back to development, I would say that in a way, Africa needs isolation. A little bit. We need everybody else out of our business for a good 10, 20 years. And just us take care of home. And try to be as homogenous as possible. And I know that's really difficult in the most ethnically diverse place on earth,
Okay.
continent.
You're getting into next week's topic.
Am I now?